Nintendo has one. Sony has a bad one. It's time for Microsoft to do one. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Build a Game Workshop. I'm your host. And like I said in that super short intro, today we are building the essentially Microsoft Smash clone, right? Smash has been going on for 20 years, highly successful. PlayStation tried and failed, mostly because they relied more on characters that were essentially guest characters and marketing ploys and not like PlayStation reps. You know, no Crash, no Spyro, no original, The problems with those games have been listed on for on and on. So, with all the recent buying of IPs that Microsoft has been doing, now is as good a time as any for them to drop a Microsoft version of Smash Bros. And that's what we're going over today. Let's lay some groundwork. Up first is the roster size. I arbitrarily picked 24 because 24 sounds like a good roster size. That's really it. So, I mean, outside of that, I guess let's just go ahead and jump into it with the obvious ones. Obviously, the poster boy of Xbox, who else but the Master Chief from Halo. Do I really need to say anything else? No. Maybe a little bit about how he plays. Assuming this game would play like a Smash Brothers clone, so, A attacks, neutral B, up B, side B, down B, all that stuff. I feel like obviously his neutral B would be gun. Maybe his side B would be some sort of gravity hammer smash. I'm not saying the energy sword because, spoiler alert, another Halo character is getting in on our base roster, and I believe the energy sword is more of a that character weapon. I think kind of the bubble shield as a neutral B or not neutral B, a down B would be pretty interesting, but obviously a lot of moveset potential. Spartan Laser could get in there somewhere, but I digress. Up next is the Gears of War franchise face, Marcus Phoenix. I will admit I have not exactly kept up with the franchise after 3, which is the one where that game's over 10 years old, so it's the one where Dom dies. I haven't really kept up with the franchise. After that point, I know they have new pro tags. I don't care. None of them should get in over Marcus Phoenix, maybe as DLC, but Marcus Phoenix, come on. That chainsaw gun, perfect. And he would just be a rushdown like tank type. Very heavy, maybe not good air recovery, maybe kind of once he's off the ledge he struggles a bit, but on the ground that man should mow down everything in sight. Up next, first of maybe, I don't know if I would call this a deep cut, and I should explain a little bit. Like, when I was talking in my WWE All-Stars 2 video, I said there shouldn't be any women wrestlers because the legends would all be deep cuts. And for a game that's based around real-life properties, like, the best ones I can think of are, like, NBA Jam or, like, the NFL NBA Street games, where they don't have the full team roster. You don't want a deep cut, right? Like, if you're a Boston Celtics fan, right, and you go into Jam or Street, and they have your top 5 guys, like, you want to play with Pierce, Allen, Garnett, especially at the time, because this came out around the time period, you want to play with Pierce, Allen, Garnett, Rondo, and who was their center? Kendrick Perkins. You don't want to play with, like, the guys at the bottom of the rotation not getting minutes. Those would be the deep cuts in that game. And that's why it wouldn't be a good thing for All-Stars, because you're not really attracting any other fans with your deep cuts. But for a crossover game like this, for PlayStation, All-Stars, an example would be Fat Princess, like I said, I believe in that previous video. I'm trying to think of any others. You could argue Big Daddy, but that's more of a guest character than anything. Zach, I mean, you could argue Rash in KI was a deep cut. Same thing with General Ram. But I digress. Deep cuts in fighting games are a good thing because having those weird roster picks brings people in. You know, it brings new fans in when, as opposed to like a sports game or a real life thing where you're not really getting any more fans from it. You really kind of just want to get the guys that everybody knows. But I digress. The first quote-unquote deep cut I have is the Hero of Albion from the Fable series. It has definitely been forgotten. There hasn't really been a new mainline game in that franchise since 2010 with Fable 3. And I know there's multiple Heroes of Albion, so maybe you do the Fable 3 version or the Fable 2 version. However, if you want to go for a more named character, I know Reaver is a villain from the series who I actually have on my DLC list. Kind of somebody who could eventually get in to the game. But I think the Hero of Albion would be a great Fable representative, and the game should be represented. It is, you know, a 360, like a Prime 360 original Xbox exclusive. Up next, we're going to go ahead and divert into some of the properties they own that aren't necessarily Xbox exclusives, but, you know, Microsoft does own Bethesda and id Software. So, of course, we're going to go ahead and get some of those guys in. And we're going to start off with the Doom Marine. Preferably the Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal version, who I believe is called the Doom Slayer instead of the Doom Marine. But, you know, he goes by many names. Doom Guy, Doom Marine, Doom Slayer. To me, it's all kind of the same guy. But I believe online, the Doom Slayer is the new guy. And obviously, come on. Super Shotgun, the Chainsaw, that Energy Sword. That would be so fun to play. And there was a push to get him in Smash. You know, and I believe he got in as a Mii costume, if I remember correctly. So, obviously, there's weight to the character for him being in. And another Mii costume that is now a Microsoft property, I have the Volt Boy / Volt Girl from Fallout. You know, they are kind of like the mascot, quote-unquote, of Vault-Tec, because, again, Fallout is more based on the created character, but there's not really a set character outside of the names. Like, there's the Courier from New Vegas, there's the Soul Survivor, there's the Vault Dweller, but, you know, there's not really a face attached to the name, which is a little bit different than another character on this list. So I think the Vault Boy and Girl would be very interesting, especially because you can make a moveset basically around the perk list, you know? The Batter Up perk could be a very interesting, you know, smash attack. An interesting super would be the, what's his name? The Mysterious Stranger. That could be very interesting. There's a lot of good choices. A lot of good choices for a power. Kitty, why are you being a menace? I start to record and you're just like, hello, it is I, the menace to society. Okay, well, I guess you're a part of the video now. Up next after those, we go to a little bit of the rare properties, pun intended. And I'll just go ahead and rattle two of them off because they go hand in hand. And that's Conquer from Conker's Bad Fur Day, or Conker's Live and Reloaded, and Banjo and Kazooie, who made it into Smash. Famously, Microsoft brought Rare, and I actually forgot a couple of other Rare characters, so I'll get to them after they're on my list, but I'll get to them after I talk about Conker and Banjo. Conker is one of those that was like a very popular N64 game because of how adult it was, which is really kind of in line with what Microsoft became. It was, for lack of a better term, the adult franchise. You had games like Halo, COD, Gears of War, like kind of the more grown-up games were on there, and Conker is just like, he fits in there, you know. It's a shame that nothing's really been done with him since Bad Fur Day came out, or Live and Reloaded came out, so I really hope that changes. In Banjo-Kazooie, it's been done in Smash. I don't really need to talk about his legacy, his importance, and how he would play. Hopefully, the stage with Conker would be the Great Mighty Pooh stage, because that would be great. Keeping on the theme with rare properties, let's go ahead and hit up Joanna Dark from Perfect Dark. This was kind of like I believe on the original Xbox, it was kind of similar to GoldenEye. So that's kind of how she would play. Obviously, she was like a super spy. They did a sequel to the game on 360 called Perfect Dark Zero, where she got red hair. I have not yet played the game, but, there's moveset potential there. And speaking of 360 rare properties, Cameo from Cameo Elements of Power. This one I remember where she kind of had like Skylanders-esque transformations. Like she transformed into like, she had these abilities and she had like Skylander-like forms. Like one of them was like a little rock and another was like an ice-type bear. And, it really was one of the early Xbox exclusives for the 360. Because I remember sitting in like a Fry's Electronics and playing the demo over and over again. And, with Microsoft and the Xbox leads really focusing in more on the history of gaming, all the Xboxes have been backwards compatible. Like, I believe you can play original Xbox games on the newest system. And, like, the big thing that Xbox has over Sony is that it's all backwards compatible. Like, you can buy 360 games on the Series X, on the Xbox One. And that's fantastic. So, for a game like this, we really want to celebrate kind of the history of Xbox, and Cameo would be a great one, especially since Rare and Xbox have been together for so long. But I think the property, besides Banjo, that everybody knows Rare for, is Killer Instinct. And you can't have a fighting game without really KI reps if we're doing Xbox exclusives. And I actually have two on here because I couldn't pick, and I think they're both just as deserving of a spot. They're really kind of the mascots of the franchise. And that's Orchid and Fulgore. Fulgore is that big robot with like pseudo Wolverine claws, the prototypical rushdown character. He's like the Terminator, right? With the plume coming out of his head. And Orchid is, well, at least in the original game, she was super spy with big boobs. Because her most iconic move was her kind of, quote, fatality, where she flashed her boobs. Obviously, that's changed a little bit in recent times, but she has her Tonfa sticks, and again, they're both really kind of rushdown characters, but they fill a different niche, where Fulgore is that heavy rushdown in your face, and for a super, he can have that chest laser he has as his Ultra in KI 2016, and then Rushdown, and then Orchid would be the lighter, quicker, albeit weaker, Rushdown character, where she's kind of jumping all around and getting you from every which angle. Up next, another property not originally owned by Microsoft, but they own the IP for it now, is Rasputin, or Raz, from Psychonauts. Cult classic game, recently got a sequel. I know the original Psychonauts has always been very well regarded, and I would love to see Raz in a fighting game. I think he has great moveset potential, and that could be very fun to watch. Up next, you saw one of them in KI 2016 as a guest character, and you're going to see one of them again as a character in here, and that is one of the Battletoads. I have Rash or Zitz because I can't remember the name of the third one, but really any one of them in would be fine, or you could, depending on how different of a playstyle they really have, you could just have them be alternate skins for one another, which is probably the best bet. But Battletoads is another classic Rare franchise, insanely hard, and would fit in really as a great retro rep for the game. Up next, we have Corvo from Dishonored. You know, Dishonored is really more of a stealth game, but because of the magic system in the game and the ability to not necessarily be stealth, think kind of like the kind of stuff that like the Assassin's Creed characters can do, just to be very, very broad. That could make for a very fun fighting game, especially a platform fighter. You look at, you know, Ezio and SoulCal, again, not a platform fighter, but something similar. That'd be really fun. Up next, I did want to include Dead Rising in this game. The first one was, for the longest time, a 360 exclusive. That's where the franchise got its start. I know that Frank West is a Capcom character, and really you could argue that this spot should have gone to Frank West, but I gave it to Nick Ramos, the protagonist from Dead Rising 3, which is, albeit not the most forgettable, probably the most forgettable, but not the worst Dead Rising game. I really liked the arcade DLC, and it seemed to be more character and story driven, especially more than 4, which also was a timed Xbox exclusive. And you know, I do think Frank West would be a great DLC character, but Dead Rising 3 is still a Xbox One exclusive. Dead Rising 4 eventually came to the PlayStation 4. Same with 2, same with 1 eventually. Like, every other game except 3 has been on another console. So I would like to kind of focus first on the one game that's still a Xbox One exclusive, and that would be Nick Ramos. And I think it could be a little bit interesting. You could have him use more mechanic tools as opposed to Frank West's menagerie of bats, plungers, and wacky weaponry. And plus, for a super, you could have... The big thing in that game was the introduction of car weapon combos. So giving him that steamroller car weapon combo that was big in the marketing of that game would be fantastic, you know. And plus, I think you could give him a very rudimentary version of Steve's kind of crafting ability, because another big thing that Dead Rising 3 introduced over the other games was crafting on the fly. You no longer needed a crafting table. So I think that could be a neat little concept. Maybe make that his down B or his neutral B. Which, I'll go ahead and talk about this. I don't have Steve in the base game roster. Sakurai can make it work. I am not confident that anybody who is not Sakurai can make that work. But he's in the DLC because he would have to be there and he has to be mentioned. But moving on, we have another duplicate franchise character. I know I talked about KI being duplicate first, but it's the face, right? Halo is the face of Xbox. You gotta have multiple characters, and the counterpart to Master Chief, especially after Halo 2, is the Arbiter. And besides, he's voiced by Keith David, so absolutely, get Keith David in this game, please. And this is why I didn't want to give Master Chief the energy sword, because I feel like it fits more on the Arbiter. So kind of have Master Chief have more of the standard USMC weapons. Arbiter has more of the alien weapons, but they could play very similar to each other. Up next, another in the same vein, kind of like Raz or Steve, another indie, or Cuphead, who is not on this list. Another indie franchise Microsoft owns is Ori from Ori and the Blind Forest. Full admission, again, I have not played the game, but I think, you know, it's very well regarded. So, and I believe we saw it in an indie platform fighter. Oh god, which one though? I want to say it was Rivals of Aether, but don't quote me on that. Ooh, I'm being exposed as a fake fighting game fan. Fun. Fun, fun, fun. The next two I want to talk about kind of fill the same void, which is you don't really see them as Xbox exclusives anymore, but similar to Dead Rising in a way, similar to some of the other games I've mentioned, they got their start on the Xbox, and now those are Geralt of Rivera from the Witcher franchise and Commander Shepard from Mass Effect. I believe for the longest time, Mass Effect 1 and 2 were exclusive to the 360. I think they got re-released on the PS3 or the PS4 at some point. But those games are always... And Witcher 1 was a PC exclusive, Witcher 2 was a 360... Witcher 2 was a 360 exclusive, and then Witcher 3 came out on everything. But, again, Xbox is big on their history, and these two characters have their history deep within the Xbox roots. And Commander Shepard, because I mentioned I didn't want to have the create a character like the Soul Survivor, the Courier, the Vault Dweller from Fallout. Commander Shepard still has a face. I know it's a create a character, but there's still a default male and a default female that are widely known. You show people a picture of the default Commander Shepard, everybody knows it's oh yeah, that's Commander Shepard. Can't really do that with Fallout. So, those are those two. Up next, we have to include one of these guys in here, and this one is definitely a deep cut. Because the big thing the 360 was known for, their big gimmick was the Kinect. And we have to include a Kinect character. It is, unfortunately, part of Microsoft and Xbox's history. So, I did a little research, and I wanted to do Dance Central, because I thought that was kind of the most well-regarded Kinect game, and I was wrong. The most well-regarded Kinect game is the Gunstringer, which is a little marionette puppet who's a cowboy. And I think that could be kind of an interesting moveset to do. He would maybe play a little bit like Cuphead, but again, my excuse for that is Captain Falcon came from a racing game. They made him a moveset that works in a fighting game, so it'll work. It'll work. And then the last one that might not be controversial is Senua from Hellblade. I know it's supposed to be a psychological thriller. Admittedly, I have not played it, but I know that it is been very well received, and it's another one of those indie Xbox properties. And that puts us at 21 characters. So the last three, one of them is a very, very deep cut that is a guilty pleasure of mine, and the other two are kind of related to the elephant in the room for this game. Many people know that Microsoft recently tried to buy Activision Blizzard, and I was hesitant to put Activision Blizzard properties on this list, partly because I remember hearing that the buyout was actually vetoed because it might violate antitrust laws or anti-monopoly laws, because then it would be too much of the market share, because Activision Blizzard is so big in terms of just base level properties. You have COD, you have Candy Crush, you have Overwatch, you have Diablo, you have StarCraft, you have... Oh my god, how many more? Spyro, crap. There's so many properties under that banner. And that kind of led into my concern, where a lot of those properties don't... We get into the territory of PlayStation All-Stars with, Big Daddy and Evil Cole or New Dante or Raiden, where it's they don't feel like PlayStation characters. Captain Price doesn't feel like an Xbox character. Spyro and Crash certainly don't feel like Xbox characters, so I put two on the base roster who I felt I could kind of get away with. One of them maybe less so, but the one who definitely feels like an Xbox character is Alex Mercer from Prototype. For those of you who haven't played the game, the Prototype games are basically god simulators. You can just go around in a sandbox world and destroy everything with cool superpowers. And more people, I think, have played the first one, which why I went with Alex Mercer instead of James, the protag of the second one. And, for a moveset would be ideal for a Smash clone. You have the Hammer Fist, you have the Claws, you have the Tether Grab, you have so many things at your disposal. But the last Activision Blizzard character on this list is from Overwatch. And I think it's not Tracer. I think Tracer is white bread in terms of... Okay, let me rephrase that. I think every character from Overwatch is white bread. They're all boring. None of them have really any depth. So, my choice for someone from Overwatch was basically, if I boil them down to one phrase, who do I like more? Who can actually give a moveset? And it's not Scout Knockoff. It's definitely not any of the healers. It really came down to Fat Pig Man, Cowboy, Hammer Bro, or Gamer Goblin. And I went with the Gamer Goblin. I went with Diva. I think the whole mech thing is a very interesting gimmick. You could play it very similar to Zero Suit Samus and Samus, where you kind of change forms on your ultimate move, or you play it more like Sheik and Zelda, where it goes down on a stance change, and the stance change where it would be, it would be damaging if you are going from mech to not in mech, the mech would self-destruct and you jump out, and going from not in mech to mech, you just summon the mech, kind of like Diva's current ultimate in Overwatch 1 the last time I saw it. So, that's that. But now it's the character I'm most excited for. This is the fat princess of the game, folks. Did you know that Nintendo of America owned the Major League Baseball franchise, the Seattle Mariners, for something like 20 years? I believe they finally sold their shares in late 2010s. And they might have been only minority owners, but they still own a good chunk of the Mariners. Did you know the former Microsoft CEO is the current owner of the basketball team, the Los Angeles Clippers? Yeah, I'm putting the Clippers mascot in this game, exclusively because I think it would be funny to have a character that is essentially meta, but dumb. I think it would just be a very funny character. There's not a lot of sports fighting game characters. I know SNK had like Brian and Lucky Globber. There's not that many more. Some fighting games have like a baseball rep, but like not a lot of them. Wrestling's kind of the obvious. Wrestling and boxing are like the obvious two sports ones, like Balrog, El Fuerte. Of course, I'm automatically going to all of the Street Fighter ones, but you get the point. So I would love to see another basketball character go in. I remember when the Smash Ultimate DLC was going down, it's like, oh man, I would love to see like a LeBron James get in the game just so that we can get a LeBron James amiibo, because that would be hilarious. But there actually could be a moveset potential that would be goofy enough to work. Obviously, a neutral B would be something like a basketball throw or a basketball pass. Up special would be getting launched out of a cannon, So, yeah, Chuck the Condor, the Los Angeles Clippers mascot, is the last character of the base game and is 100% going to be the thing to turn this into the actual Smash Bros. Competitor. But going over the base game roster, we got Master Chief and the Arbiter from Halo. Marcus Phoenix from Gears of War, Vault Boy / Vault Girl from Fallout, the Doom Slayer from Doom, the Hero of Albion, or Reaver from Fable, but probably the Hero of Albion, Conker from Conker's Bad Fur Day, Banjo and Kazooie from Banjo Kazooie, Fulgore and Orchid from Killer Instinct, Rasputin or Raz from Psychonauts, one of the Battletoads, really Rash, Zitz, or the other one, but they could really all just be alternate skins for each other, similar to Olimar and Alf, Corvo from Dishonored, Nick Ramos from Dead Rising 3, Joanna Dark from Perfect Dark, Ori from Ori and the Blind Forest, Geralt of Riviera from Witcher, the Witcher franchise, Cameo from Cameo Elements of Power, Commander Shepard from Mass Effect, the Gunstringer from Gunstringer, Senua from Hellblade, Diva from Overwatch, Alex Mercer from Prototype, and Chuck the Condor, the LA Clippers mascot. So kind of some honorable mentions / DLC characters who I wanted to at least mention or get into the game. And again, you'll kind of see when I get there. First one's Cortana. Obviously, that would be kind of a harder character to do since she doesn't have a physical body, but it is a video game, so video game logic it, please. Frank West was another one. I think he's kind of a bigger deal than Nick Ramos. And another thing about deep cuts is you want your deep cuts to not be DLC. Because unless you're selling it by the season pass, similar to... I'm trying to think of an example who only does season pass content. The WWE 2K games only really do packs. Street Fighter V might have really only done packs. I know you can buy them individually for the in-game currency, but for money you had to buy the season pass, I believe. But you don't want your deep cuts to be DLC. You want your deep cuts to be base game. And that is because all the deep cuts are gambles, right? And it's like, while you do need the wacky characters and the more obscure characters in a game to kind of bring new life to these franchises, to, you know, bring up their history, if you make them DLC, then you're kind of putting yourself in a position to where it financially backfires. You know, putting a deep cut in the base game, it's like, would you, for example, Chuck the Condor, it's like, would you want to buy that as DLC or have that in the base game along with Master Chief, Marcus Phoenix, and the Arbiter, right? So, I'd rather have Frank West as DLC in that case. Also DLC, we're going to have Tracer. She is the face of the franchise, so whatever. I think she's boring. I would rather have Pigman, Cowboy, or Hammer Bro, aka Roadhog. I don't know what they changed McCree's name to because I do not play Overwatch, and Reinhardt. Up next are the PlayStation mascots that Xbox owns now. Spyro, Dr. Cortex, and Crash. I don't really need to say more about them. They're iconic characters. I don't know why they didn't end up in I mean, I do know why they weren't in PlayStation All-Stars, probably because Sony couldn't get the rights from Activision, but they're iconic PlayStation mascots. I don't need to really say more. Steve, obviously a big one. Kind of just have the same thing. I have another KI character on my list. I put Riptor, Cinder, Glacius, or TJ Combo. Those seem, or Spinal, like those all seem like very iconic characters. I know Jago is like the Ryu of the franchise in terms of like he's kind of like the Shoto good guy, but when people say KI, I don't think Jago. I think of like Fulgore and Orchid and the 5 characters I just named: Spinal, Cinder, Glacius, TJ Combo, and Riptor. So really one of those should be next. And KI is a huge franchise too, so it should 100% get a third rep. And then kind of deep cuts. I did mention Reaver previously. Kerrigan from StarCraft. I don't know much about the game. I have heard the name Kerrigan before. I think she was a good guy who became a Spider Queen. or something. I know StarCraft is like a real-time strategy game like Impossible Creatures, which is really the only real-time strategy game I have played, so there's my experience with that. But I know StarCraft is huge, and I know Kerrigan is like the main bad guy of that franchise. And then the last character is Jade from Beyond Good and Evil. I know that game has a big cult classic following, and, you know, I believe her IP is owned by Microsoft, and it would be nice to see such a historic character get back into the game. But that's my list. I know this video is probably going to be a little bit shorter than some of my other Build a Game Workshop videos. I know it's definitely shorter than the Marvel NRS one. I know it's definitely shorter than the WWE All-Stars one, but the roster for this one was also a lot smaller than those games. And I kind of had less to talk about because, you know, for all these characters, the moveset speaks for themselves. You know, it's like, do you really want to hear me go into detail about how the Master Chief would play versus how Orchid would play? It's like, no. You already have an idea in mind. You know, all these characters are very, very iconic, and the only one I needed to talk about is my guilty pleasure pick of Chuck the Condor. But, you know, if there's anybody else you would like to see on this list, make sure to leave a comment below. Feel free to like and subscribe. I'm trying to figure out ways to grow my channel. I don't have another Build a Game Workshop on the back burner this time, so can't tell you what's going to be coming up next, but hopefully you guys will at least join me for that journey as well. You know, all the YouTube stuff, you know, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, you know, it really helps out and all that. You know, I really just want people to watch the videos, to be honest. That's kind of my main thing. This is my creative outlet, and I'm trying to make it work. So until next time, everybody, drive safe.